Welcome, Cheryl Swallow. This is amazing to have you here. And I want to welcome, this is our fourth podcast where we're interviewing someone, and you bravely stepped up to the mic, and I think we're going to have a really good session. I look forward to talking to you. Cheryl is with the Belleville Quinte West Community Health Center, and your job title now is?
So it recently changed in December. I worked frontline for 13 years as a community resource worker. So, and now I've stepped into the manager of community health programs and engagement position. So brand new.
Big role.
Yeah.
And so this is really timely because you mentioned something really brilliant about empathy and boundaries and burnout. And are you looking at burnout in a different lens in your new role? Where is burnout resonating for your team? Where are you seeing it? We do these because we want to have a local flavor, but healthcare is such a different beast.
It can be, for sure. And so before, I guess, it was always me, keeping myself from experiencing burnout. And I have certain things that I do and certain practices that I have. And now that I'm working more with the team and seeing it more broadly, and everybody experiences it differently, and you see things and you want to be able to help the people that are doing the frontline work, because they're so amazing and their hearts are so big and they're so gifted in that area, but they do get overwhelmed.
And we see that especially with new staff, because new staff come in with that energy, and they've come to your agency for certain reasons, and they dig in, and then they realize that no matter how far you dig, you're still digging with the same shovel.
Mm-hmm.
And you can't change everything overnight.
Right, and the system often isn't our friend. I mean, we sit with a lot of people who are very complex and have a lot going on in their lives, and it's sad, and it's hard, and there's often not anything we can do. And one of the things I will say to people, and I would always remind myself of that, is never underestimate the importance of sitting in it with somebody. Right?
Yeah, sit with them, and then you see them.
Mm-hmm.
And they're not a number.
Yeah, they feel heard and they feel valued, and just that alone gives them what they need to persevere, to press on, right? Yeah.
How many years have you been in the service? How many years experience have you brought to this table?
Oh, so I was customer service when I was younger in retail, and I don't think that's a bad foundation.
No, it isn't.
There's a lot of difficult interactions with that. So,
is there?
Yeah.
Yes.
But then many years working with the Salvation Army, an emergency worker for Hastings County, a little bit of time in Napanee at Addictions and Mental Health Services, and then I landed here at the Community Health Center.
So frontline. And in that time, do you think the work is harder now than it was 15 years ago? Or is it just different?
It's an interesting question. It should be easier, because we've been working hard to make it easier and eliminate so many things. So I would say that it hasn't changed much. For me personally, it got harder just because I've been doing it for many years, and that is part of the reason why I made a career change as well, right? Because I was very in tune to the fact that I'm experiencing some burnout after all these years. So
that is such an important mission, because if we can say that we're experiencing burnout, it makes a safe place and removes stigma for other staff to say, yeah, I'm there too. Can we talk about it?
Mm-hmm.
Do you see stigma with people saying, I might be experiencing burnout, so they hide it, or they don't disclose that they might be struggling in their position right now because of things? Or is there an ease now for people to say, I am not okay?
I think there's an ease, and I don't like to talk about COVID too much, but I think it kind of pushed us all over the edge to a place where we're we just don't know who we are, or what this life is anymore.
Absolutely.
And there was a vulnerability in that, I think, where we started to share a little bit more our fear was very real about a lot of different things. So a lot of pretenses fell away, and we just wanted to know, how can we build community and build each other up the best we can? And there was a vulnerability in that for sure.
And does it remain, or as we move past, as we're post-COVID, moving into a whole unique world probably in the next few months, do you think that vulnerability remains, or do people hide it? Or how do you keep the vulnerability there?
Yeah, I think so. I can only speak in my role at the community health center, and I know that they're working really hard at just allowing space for that, being a safe space. I don't know that all organizations go through different seasons of change, and maybe we haven't always acknowledged or been a safe place for people, but there again, that's one of the reasons that I did want to take this position, is because I'm very that's important to me, right? To build community and build a healthy community where people feel safe to share things with each other. So I think the community health center itself is on a good track, but I can't speak for every place. I don't know.
And that's interesting, and I think it starts where we're at, right? And I remember you came with Jamie back in the day. We were at Century Place still, and this building was going to happen, this community health center. Haven't quite opened the doors, but it was coming. And look at the growth, and look at where the community health center has decided that it belongs in places that deal directly with poverty and homelessness. And you and I did a couple of hoarding cases together back in the day.
Yeah, we did.
And that whole relationship building, I think, is something that the CHC really takes great pride in. And I know when I was on the board, that was something I was very proud of, because of those connections, and they kind of set that standard as we move into doing some of the other work. But at that risk of stretching, though, we stretch our teams, and you talked about that empathy and boundaries. Can we get into that a little bit more? Can we dig that out?
Yeah.
Because I think you've hit on something about it is okay to have boundaries around the empathy of the client base that we're working with.
I think you have to have boundaries. You have to know what they are, because this is the thing.
But how do you know what your boundaries are?
So you can sit with someone and show empathy, but there's that whole readiness for change spectrum, right? And some people, you just need to sit with them and be with them for that limited amount of time, and you need to be able to walk away. We need to recognize that everybody has their own path and their own journey. I always used to say, I'm not going to work harder than the client does, right?
Right, yeah.
But I'll sit with you, and if we don't go anywhere, that's okay for a limited amount of time, because you do recognize that it takes time to build trust. But a lot of times, we will expose ourselves over and over again to the same situation, and if the client isn't ready for change, then that can be really hurtful to us, because they're not ready to make a move, and then we get pulled into that, and I think that sometimes is what overwhelms us. Our primary care providers, for instance, they're clinical people, and they know what people need to do to get better, so it's so disheartening for them, and so frustrating at times, because, well, if they would just do this and this, but people aren't ready, so then how do you need to have your boundaries in that. It's like you can't keep coming back for this until you're ready to take action.
And that's sometimes the art of saying no, right? And that
doesn't feel right somehow, but it has to be for our sake, because we matter too. So it's the slogan of the community health center: everyone matters. And now in this position, I say to the staff, and you matter too. You're part of that equation, right? It's not,
And we forget that.
We can forget that when we're out there.
And especially some of our frontline workers that are in the midst of some of the more complex community issues right now. And we all send staff to support other agencies in the frontline places at the bridge. And it is kind of ground zero for some of the most tragic and tragic yet frustrating pieces of our community right now. And people walk away from that with things not changing. And it's just going back to more of the same. So how do you not let someone get hardened? Or if you're seeing someone get hardened, how do you change that trajectory as a manager and as a support? How do you say, here's a boundary?
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, Alex, I just banged the table. As we know, Alex won't like me banging the table. I'll hear about it when we go to edit. I'm getting so smart about this now. Anyways, don't bang the table, because then he'll yell at me.
Okay.
We forget the frustration, or I think we carry frustration home more with some of the people we work with than sometimes the sadness. Because you think, oh, if they'd only do this, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's where I ruminate. And like, we could be doing this, or this person could be doing so much if they would just invest this part of themselves.
Mm-hmm.
That's where I carry frustration. So that boundary piece, how do you teach it? How do you say, put this down, you matter? And not be lip service, Cheryl.
It's really hard, right? So I try to give the staff just a place just to be. And so if like we'll go for a walk, or we'll sit somewhere and just talk about whatever comes up after a situation like that and how they're feeling. And I think, so just giving them space to talk about it, but also then just reminding them that people that are unwell, it's not easy to be well. Like, we've all had our struggles where we've been unhealthy, and it's like, it's hard work to get better. It's really hard work. And some people just aren't at that place. But every single time you touch a life, you have an impact on them. So yes, you're frustrated because they're not changing today, but what you've given them and what you've put out will return. And you may never see that, right? And it doesn't always return with everyone. That's not fair to say, but there's a lot of times where you are just a building block on somebody's way to the wellness. So you do have an impact even if you don't see it.
And I think that's a really interesting perspective, because it means you're not carrying the whole thing.
Right?
And so many of us, in our roles too, and doing the work we do, you feel like you're carrying the whole thing. But when you look at it as you're just part of, I think it allows you to put some of this down.
Mm-hmm.
I can't carry this for the client. I shouldn't carry it, and I can't carry it. So it is okay to put that part down. This is the piece that I can do. I love, we'll make a quote of that for the video title, because that's brilliant. And that can stay on tape, because I thought that was very profound on how you approach that. See, look how good you are, and you don't even know it. And people are so afraid to come and sit and talk with me. That just shouldn't happen. The piece that matters too, though, is that you have a very interesting management component at the health center, because you have a primary care,
Mm-hmm.
and you have community, and a lot of times community and primary care, though the same goals, approach things very differently, right?
Yeah.
And then at that management level, how is everybody taking care of themselves in order to take care of the people that are doing the front line? Or are they?
I think we're getting better at that, at being a whole instead of two sets. So this is interesting that you mentioned the clinical side and the community health side, because I don't know if you'd call it stigma or judgment, but it's the community health side. They're all the feels, and the clinical, they're all the hard line, right? And it's like, when you spend time with clinical and they spend time with us, we realize that that's not true at all, right? So they do have certain guidelines and certain things that hem them in, but the weight they feel in their heart and in their being is so much similar. So once you spend time together and you listen to each other, then I guess we have more empathy for each other, right? Like, so we're getting a better understanding that we're not two sides of the same of the house, right? That we are linked together, and that was very purposeful for management to try and to connect us, and I think they're doing a good job.
And that's amazing, because we still struggle in a primary care setting, especially in the hospital. You know, a social worker, social service worker, regardless of designation, going in with a client, there isn't the same respect, I think, that we get in terms of observations we make, because we don't use the clinical language of an MD or a nurse, and that to the detriment of a client that could be in crisis. And I think as we try to understand, try to build those bridges, especially to our ER, because that's so important from our perspective, right? And I think that's a really good piece about where the commonalities are, and we have the same feels, but it's boundaries. Their job and their clinical role, and our job and our advocate role, right? And where are the similarities and where can we connect? But I think we have to start looking at that lens for both sides, because it's still a struggle in terms of emergency care, not to just check a box for a complex need client, that whether it's drug-seeking behavior, but no, actually there is something bigger than this going on. We're comfortable with understanding the addiction, but please understand this person is very ill too at this point, and it's not for painkillers. This is the type of thing you struggle with, and I love that whole view about trying to understand the other side, because maybe that will build some empathy bridges between the two components that we desperately need. And I think that's one of the joys of walking into the health center is if we go in with a client, especially, for some of your programs that were just so amazing, like the dental program and things like that, they were just treated as a human being.
Yeah, as they should be, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
We won't unpack that statement today, because we don't have enough time, but we certainly will touch upon it.
No, and it's a beautiful thing, and we don't do it perfectly, because, and no agency does, and it's very easy to start throwing stones, right? And we've done that in our community. Every community does, and I think we have to take the lead in not doing that. Having a better understanding, hey, we're all frustrated. The system is not our friend. It doesn't work. We all know that. But we need to be friends within that system and figure out a better way to do things, because there are really good people in every single agency, and they're all trying to do the best they can. And
And see, that is how I think we start to build, is by that lens. And we've always taken great pride. We're a little agency, but we always take great pride. Big heart, yes, that's us, big heart. Birkenstock and big heart, granola, all on the table. But it is about a big heart and a capacity to work partnerships, because we know if we work in partnership, it's a collective that can come together for the client good, right? And some of the partnerships are unique and strange, but wonderful. And yet there are wonderful partnerships that just kind of just go along because they don't need a lot of care, because we know the same values. And I think that's what's so brilliant about the CHC and the Enrichment Center working together. There's, we have lots of crossover clients and staff, and, there's the pop-ins and stuff like that. And it just works because I think there's a respect, understanding that we're all trying to do our best. And I think at the end of the day, when we come back to burnout, I think you've just said that so well, is that to understand you're just doing, this is the best you can do today with this client, and put it down. You got some final thoughts on burnout and empathy? You're very wise. I like this. You're even wiser with wine, but I won't say anything about that.
No, I just, I appreciate being here today, and
Wasn't so hard, was
I
it?
hope it was a little bit helpful, but I think, it is hard when there's so much tragedy and people are so broken, and there really isn't a lot we can do except give them a safe place to be until they're ready, if they're ready to move forward.
There's not a lot of soft places in the world, and it's nice to be one.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah, when you can, for sure.
Thank you. This has been awesome. I can't believe you helped
I wish
me.
I could say the same.
I know. sure you can. Don't scare other people
No.
away from coming and sitting
No, it's
here.
lovely, and that's the only reason I agreed to come is because you're so easy to talk to, and I can just like look at you, and I don't have to think about anything else. It's just a conversation, right?
Well, and this is and I think this is exactly what we're trying to do, is make this easy and make frontline staff not have to look at this at work or whatever, but if they're struggling at home or they've got a quiet moment, they can pop one of these on and they know Sandy, they know Cheryl, or they know Tracy, and it's people talking about the stuff that impacts them in their day-to-day. It's not an abstract. And I think if we're going to talk about stigma and we're going to talk about burnout, it has to be from the people that they know and see and understand that we're struggling too.
And if we can be connected to each other and build community, I think that goes a long way.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Oh my
Keep it all in.